Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gloria and thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today I wanted to go through some of my plants, actually all of my plants, that are growing up moss poles right now. So I'm really into kind of having my plants climb up moss poles, and it really gives support for the plants, so kind of like a double win. And yeah, I just wanted to show you guys these plants and maybe give you guys some ideas on how to make your moss poles and how to kind of make them a little bit better, because I used to make them really terribly and like crooked, and this is just like a better version, you know? So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of my new videos. And yeah, let's just jump right into today's video. We'll start off with my beloved Monstera Thai Constellation. So this little baby is actually growing up one kind of medium-sized moss pole. I have some thinner ones, some thicker ones, and medium ones. So it really depends on how big the plant is and how much support it really needs. If the plant mainly just needs it to kind of not topple over or like control its like crazy vines like Hoyas, I tend to make it a lot thinner. But for aroids, I do make it a little bit thicker so that it kind of has more moss, more width for the roots to grow into the moss. So yeah, this is how the moss pole is looking like. I just stuffed some like netting that I bought from Home Depot, which is like a plastic wire that you can just kind of bend and cut to your liking and your size. And then I fill it with some moss and I just stick it right into a semi-hydro setup, which is in leca right now. And then it helps wick the water up the moss pole, so it's like a self-watering moss pole, so that the moss can stay wet and moist so that the roots can just grow into the moss pole. So yeah, this is the first one that I have, which is the Thai Constellation. Very nice plant. It looks really great. I don't particularly see any of the roots growing into the moss pole right now, just because the node is like kind of close to the bottom and it might be kind of covered with the leca as well. But mainly there's just a lot of roots kind of on the outside of the pot where you can see lots of good healthy roots. So yeah, this is plant number one, which is Monstera Thai Constellation. Stable variegation, very good variegated monstera if that's a plant that you're looking for. Moving on, I'll go through another aroid. This one is a philodendron. So this one is the Philodendron squamiferum. I have two plants in here. It has the red petioles and it also has my beautiful moss pole kind of sandwiched between the two plants. So I have one growing up on either side of the moss pole so that it can look more full and it's not just like forward facing, if you know what I mean. So yeah, there's two plants here. There's a plant on this side and there's a plant on that side. Very nice. And I do see some of the roots kind of grown into the moss, but I don't really want to disturb it too much because once it's attached, it's really hard to kind of remove it. You have to do so really gently and also very carefully and slowly. So yeah, I try to stick the moss pole not all the way to the very bottom of the leca, but just like slightly touching the top of the leca water reservoir so that it can kind of hydrate itself but not be so wet that it absorbs all the water and then the roots don't get any of the water. I have two more philodendrons that are also growing up moss poles, and this one is the melanochrysum. Also a very kind of beautiful philodendron. It has really velvety leaves. This is one of the new leaves that came out. It looks so nice and big compared to the leaf before that, prior to the chop. So actually the chop made it a little bit bigger, which I'm really surprised. And I have another plant on this side as well. So you can see there's a growth point here. It kind of got stuck. So yeah, it broke off, but hopefully a new like leaf will come out soon. But that is the second plant. Very dark and velvety. So as the plant matures, I find that the leaves do get a little bit darker and more kind of like a dark green as opposed to like a light green resembling a mican's. Very apparent differences as the plant gets more mature. So yeah, this one is also in a semi-hydro setup. As you can see, the moss on this guy is super green versus some of them, which are not in as much sunlight, are a little bit more beige colored moss, if you can tell. It's more apparent on my squamiferum actually. So yeah, totally different colors of moss. This one obviously gets a lot lower lighting than my melanocrysum, as you can tell by the moss. But yeah, Third plant is the Philodendron melanochrysum. And moving on, this is the gigas. So Philodendron gigas, also a velvet leaf philodendron. The only difference between the gigas and the melanochrysum, if they were of the same maturity, is that the gigas has a lot less apparent lobes. So as you can see, the heart shape is more rounded at the top for the gigas, and then for melanochrysum, it's supposed to be more heart shaped and like pointier ears, you know? So this one, I really like it just because of the sheer size of the leaves right now. Like, look at the size of this leaf and look at how dark the leaves are. It's so amazing, so velvety, so soft. But yeah, this one is growing on also a medium-sized moss pole. I find my philodendrons and aroids do well on these medium-sized moss poles, and I try not to make it too thick so you don't waste as much moss. And I just connect it using some plant velcro, and the netting is just attached using zip ties to kind of make that like cylinder shape so that you can stuff it with moss. So it doesn't really matter if you roll the moss in with the wire or you roll it up and put the moss in on top and then you just like poke it down. For me, it's the same thing. I don't really care which way I do it. This one, I could tell for sure that the roots have actually grown into the moss. So you could tell like right here, there's a piece of root literally attached from down here all the way across the moss, and it's sticking out through here. And yeah, it's just doing really, really well. And once it attaches, I find the leaves grow so much bigger. So that's definitely a benefit of growing your plants on moss poles. And it just makes it look more organized, if you know what I mean, so that your plants aren't like flopping over and touching other plants and just making a whole mess. This makes sure that all the plants are just growing upwards. Now I have two syngoniums to show you guys because I find syngoniums do really well on moss poles as well, because they grow area roots so easily and just like grabs onto the moss pole, and then it just like climbs, as opposed to trailing and vining syngoniums. I don't really like the look of that. The leaves grow smaller and it's just really messy looking. So yeah, this one is my Syngonium albo with its beautiful variegation. So I really like how the new leaves come out with a darker green. Sometimes they fade to like a lighter green over time as they kind of like maybe get older and die off. But yeah, I try not to give it too much light now because I think when it gets too much light, it bleaches the leaves a little bit, and I don't really like that. I really like how dark the green is on these newer leaves, which you can tell by these two new leaves, which are new. Also, this one is a new leaf. But yeah, this one has two plants growing up either side of the moss pole. It looks more bushy, if you guys know what I mean. And that way it can both just climb up on either side and just look really, really nice. This one has really crazy roots as well. So let's see if I can show you guys. I have holes in this takeout container so that it can just, you know, water can go into the lacquer and then just absorb up the roots. Next up is my favorite syngonium, which is the Syngonium whenlandii. This one has a much skinnier moss pole because I only have one plant growing up this, and I just want it all forward facing as opposed to Syngonium albo. I have two plants on either side, so I made that moss pole a little bit thicker. But this one is a nice tall thin one because the leaves grow so quickly on this. I find it grows faster than my albo. So my whenlandii, definitely a faster grower compared to the albo, and yeah, just very beautiful long skinny leaves with silver streaking in the middle. And I have a bunch of babies at the bottom that I've still yet to propagate and cut off. But yeah, I think it's probably taking too much energy from the mother plant, so I'm gonna have to do that soon. There's 2 or 3 babies at the bottom. Still has some way to go. So I would say like it's halfway up the moss pole now, so it still has this much. Meaning I don't have to extend the moss pole because I don't know how to do that with this setup. But once it reaches the top, I'm probably just gonna have to chop it. So yeah, you have to make sure that the type of moss pole you make for your plants. Okay, we're down to 2 Hoyas. I don't generally keep my Hoyas on moss poles. I like to keep them on kind of wire trellises or bamboo trellis because I don't really think they need a moss pole. But for this one, I had a really long tendril growing on this plant, and I find it had to wrap it up, this moss pole, and I couldn't find a trellis. So that's why I made a little moss pole for this. Very skinny because it doesn't really need a moss pole. It's just for it to not flop over and like get all over the place. But this one is my Hoya viola, whatever you want to call it, but it has kind of like a rounded edge and it's very, very cute. I like this so much more than the Dakii because I think this one's supposed to be a lot easier. And I actually have some new growth growing at the tip over here. It's very hard to see. It's kind of blended in with the moss pole, but it's like right over there. And yeah, I can't wait for this to push out a new leaf because I've been rooting this for a really long time. It's finally rooted in the leca. Same with this guy, which is my Hoya finlaysonii Splash. So this one, honestly, it's not that pretty of a plant. I don't show it too often because it doesn't really do much. It's a really slow grower. But yeah, this is how the leaves look. Very splashy, very long, very succulent-like. I think it's just a matter of how slow it's growing that I don't really love it. But I mean, it's still a cool plant, and I have 2 plants growing up this skinny little moss pole. I don't know how to make it look less messy, but it looks really messy. I don't know, like, if you guys feel the same, but it's just like kind of pointing in all different directions. I tried to wrap the tendrils kind of all around the moss pole, but I don't think I really did a good job. And yeah, this is how it's looking like, and I don't really know how to fix it. I guess maybe it's just like a really weird growth habit, because I think on a trellis it looks just as bad, so I don't really know what to do with that plant. But yeah, those are pretty much all 8 plants that I have growing up moss poles right now. I have a few more really big plants that are on moss poles, like my pink princess philodendron and my heartleaf philodendron, that are just too big and I don't want to carry those, but I have those as well. So those ones use my old style moss poles where I wrap it with like burlap and moss in the middle and like a stick. So those are a lot less stable versus these. They don't really shift around that much. Like it's pretty like stuck on. So really good moss poles. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Comment down below which plants you have growing up moss poles as well. I would love to know, because moss poles are definitely really underrated, and I think super easy to DIY, and you don't have to spend money on it, but it makes your plants look amazing. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys in my next video. Bye.